I didn't know it was the last toast. The wine glistened in the glass, the deep ruby red swirling in front of me. A perfect evening, they said. The kind of night that was supposed to be filled with celebration, laughter, and love. But none of that existed for me. Not anymore. The glittering chandeliers above us, the soft hum of voices around me, it was all a facade. Behind it, I could feel the world falling apart. The clink of glasses, the smiles, the soft laughter, they were all there. But my eyes were fixed on my sister. She stood beside me, her smile too wide, too perfect, as she lifted her own glass, meeting my eyes with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "To family," she said, her voice smooth like silk, but there was something underneath it. I couldn't place it, but I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I lifted my glass, my fingers trembling slightly as I forced a smile. "To family." I drank, but the moment the liquid hit my tongue, everything went black. I thought I was dying. Pain shot through my chest, the sharpness so intense I couldn't breathe. My throat closed as if it were being squeezed by invisible hands, and the room spun violently. The laughter around me faded into distant echoes, and I could feel my knees giving way. The ground rose up to meet me, but I didn't hit it. Instead, everything went cold. For a moment, I thought I had passed out. But no. I was still conscious, still aware. The truth crept up like a silent thief. I had been poisoned. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My eyes darted to my sister, standing by the corner of the room, watching me. Her lips curled into a smile, not one of concern, but of victory. I was the prey, and she was the hunter. I tried to move, but my body betrayed me. I fell to the ground, unable to stop it. The cold marble pressed against my cheek, and I could taste something. Metallic, bitter, like death itself. Was this how I was going to die? My vision blurred as my heart thundered in my chest, and the last thing I saw was Ethan, my husband, standing across the room, his back turned to me. He was laughing with the woman who had been sleeping in our bed, the woman who had been in my life for years. The woman who had been the shadow in my life. My sister, my husband, and the woman they had betrayed me for. The betrayal cut deeper than the poison ever could. I closed my eyes, and everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital bed. The sterile air, the white walls, the beeping machines. It was all so surreal. I tried to move, but my body felt weak, as if I had been torn apart and put back together in the wrong way. But then I remembered. I was poisoned. My sister, my husband, and the woman who had stolen my life from me. They thought I was dead. But they were wrong. I wasn't dead. I was reborn. And this time, I wouldn't make the mistake of trusting anyone. The beeping of the machines was the first sound I heard as I woke. The rhythmic pulse of life and death intertwined, haunting me as I tried to make sense of the world around me. Everything felt too distant, like I was drifting between two planes of existence, one foot still in the past, the other in a world I didn't recognize. I blinked, my eyelids heavy as if they had been sealed shut by the very fabric of my shattered life. My throat burned, dry, sore, as though I had been screaming for hours. When I tried to move, the sharp ache of my limbs reminded me that I had been frozen in place for far too long. Hospital. I registered it in pieces. The stark white walls, the sterile scent of antiseptic that seemed to cling to everything, the soft rustling of a nurse's uniform just beyond my reach. My fingers twitched, and I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness knocked me back down. My vision swam, and I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the world to stop spinning. "Easy, miss. You're awake." I opened my eyes again, the voice pulling me back into the present. The nurse was standing by my bedside, a gentle smile on her face. She looked so normal, so human, and yet all I could focus on was the weight of betrayal hanging heavy in the air like an invisible shroud. I had been poisoned. By my sister. And Ethan? He had been complicit. He had stood by and let it happen. How could I have been so blind? So naive? The question swirled in my mind like a toxic storm. Where am I? I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The nurse's smile faltered, but she quickly masked her concern with professionalism. "You're in St. Catherine's Hospital. You were found unconscious, but you're stable now." She moved toward a nearby machine, adjusting something, though my mind was too clouded to focus on it. I tried to sit up again, but this time I succeeded. Slowly, carefully, as if my body were a fragile thing that could shatter at any moment. "How long?" I asked, my voice hoarse as I glanced around. The hospital room felt suffocating, too bright, too cold. Nothing was familiar. Nothing felt right. 2 days, she replied, her voice soft. "You were poisoned, but we've been keeping you on a steady drip of fluids. You've been through a lot." She turned to leave, but paused, looking at me as if weighing something unsaid. "You should rest. You're not out of the woods yet." I barely heard her footsteps as she exited the room, the door closing with a soft click. Alone again. The silence was suffocating. The weight of everything, of the betrayal, the poisoning, the realization that the people I had trusted most in my life had turned against me, pressed down on me like 1,000 pounds of stone. I exhaled sharply, trying to push away the rising flood of emotion. Grief, anger, a sharp, searing ache in my chest that I hadn't felt before. I had been loved once. I had trusted once. And now, I was alone. But not for long. The thought hit me like a jolt of electricity. I wasn't dead. They had tried to kill me, but I had survived. And that meant something. I was no longer the woman I had been before, the one who had been naive, blind, trusting. I was reborn. I was going to make them pay. Hours later, I stood in front of the mirror, the glass cold against my fingertips as I stared at my reflection. The woman in the glass looked almost like me. Almost. She was paler, thinner, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper beneath her eyes. But there was something else, a fire in her gaze that hadn't been there before. She wasn't broken, not anymore. The door to the hospital room opened again, and this time, it wasn't the nurse. It was someone far more familiar. Ethan. He stepped in quietly, his gaze lingering on me for a moment before he entered fully, closing the door behind him with a faint click. His face was etched with lines I hadn't noticed before, the same arrogance in his eyes, but now there was something darker. Regret, maybe? Or was it guilt? He approached slowly, tentatively, as if afraid to come too close. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "You're awake." I'm sorry." I couldn't breathe for a moment, the sting of his apology cutting deeper than I could have imagined. "Sorry? Sorry for what? For poisoning me? For cheating on me with my sister? For abandoning me?" "I'm sorry?" I repeated, my voice a little too sharp, a little too quiet. The words hung in the air between us like poison, each syllable a wound. "You think a simple apology is enough?" His face crumpled slightly, as though he wanted to say more, but couldn't. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his hands clenching at his sides. His gaze dropped to the floor, the weight of whatever truth he had hidden from me too heavy for him to carry. "I never meant for this to happen," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But Stop," I interrupted, my voice ice cold. "Don't you dare try to justify this. You and my sister. You've both crossed a line that can never be erased. Don't act like this is something that can be apologized away." I turned away from him, my back to him now, my body trembling with the overwhelming need to stand my ground. "You don't get to come here and pretend to care," I whispered, my words cutting through the silence like glass. "You poisoned me, Ethan. You broke me, and now I'm going to break you." The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the hospital light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows against the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clenched in my lap, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Ethan was standing by the door, his back turned, as if he couldn't face me, couldn't face what he had done. But then, what could he say? What could he possibly offer after everything? The air was thick with unspoken words, each of us trapped in a moment neither of us could break free from. His apology had meant nothing to me, not anymore. The words were empty, hollow echoes that reverberated in the cold room, reminding me of the way he had lied to me, how he had betrayed me when I had loved him most. I turned my head slightly to glance at him. He hadn't moved. The air between us felt stretched thin, fragile, as if any wrong move could snap it. But in that moment, I realized I was no longer afraid of him. I wasn't the same woman I had been before. The poison that ran through my veins had not only nearly killed me, it had reborn me. I was something darker now, something they wouldn't see coming. "How long were you planning to keep this up?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. The words hung in the air like daggers, sharp and unforgiving. Ethan shifted, his posture tense, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, his hand twitched at his side, as though he wanted to reach out but didn't dare. His silence, though, was its own confession. It spoke volumes more than any apology could. "You've had years to make things right, Ethan," I continued, my voice soft, but carrying a weight of fury and grief. "And now you come to me, weeks after I've been poisoned by my own sister, weeks after everything crumbled, and you apologize?" His head dipped, his gaze flickering to the floor, but he didn't speak. It was a coward's retreat. That was always his way, sweeping the mess under the rug, hoping I would forgive him, hoping I would let it all go. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wouldn't forgive him, not this time. "Don't look at me like that," I whispered, my voice breaking for the briefest second. "You don't get to look at me with those eyes. Not after everything, not after what you've done." The words hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating, and in that moment the gravity of everything I had been through hit me all over again. The rage, the grief, the cold emptiness that gnawed at me. It was all there, surging like a tide that threatened to drown me. "You should leave," I said finally, my voice now steady, as I stood up from the bed and turned away from him. The words weren't cruel, they were simply facts. He had no place here. No place in my life anymore. Ethan didn't move. He stood there for a long while, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his own guilt had finally crushed him. But when he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, thin with regret. "I never meant for it to end like this, Sarah. You have to believe me." I shook my head, my back still turned to him. "It's too late for apologies, Ethan. You broke me. And now? You'll watch as I build myself back up. But this time, it's not for you. It's for me." I heard him take a step forward, his breath ragged, but I didn't turn. I couldn't look at him anymore. His betrayal had stained everything. "You'll never get what you want, Sarah," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'll fight for you. I'll do anything. Just say the word, fight?" I repeated softly, almost with a laugh. "You think you have a chance of redeeming yourself, after everything? You were never my fight, Ethan. You were the one who fought me. You made your choice. You poisoned me. You abandoned me. And you'll pay for it." His silence was deafening as I left him standing there. I walked to the window, looking out over the city below. The world was dark, soaked in rain, but it was alive. The city buzzed, pulsed, and breathed in the cold night air. I could feel it, everything. The weight of everything that had led me here, to this point where I would have to rebuild and destroy, rebuild and take. I would take everything they held dear. Later that night, I sat at the small desk in my hospital room, the faint glow of the computer screen illuminating my face. The night was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the occasional beeping of the machines. I was alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. The poison had barely done its work, but it had done enough. I had lived, and now I would thrive. Slowly I began typing, pulling up files on the screen, searching for anything I could use to start the war. I wasn't a helpless victim anymore. I was the one pulling the strings now. Every click, every file, every piece of information was another step in my plan. My sister, my husband, and the woman who had taken him, they would all learn the price of betrayal. I would watch them squirm. I would make sure they understood the full weight of their mistake, and the world would witness my revenge, quietly but forcefully. I would destroy everything they held dear, not with a single violent blow, but with the meticulous patience of someone who knew how to play the game. The night stretched on, and I felt the pieces fall into place. I was no longer the woman they thought would crumble. I was the storm they hadn't seen coming, and I would not be forgotten. The hours bled into one another as I sat in the sterile hospital room, the soft hum of machinery a constant reminder that I was still tethered to a world I had no desire to be a part of. Outside, the rain continued its steady fall, painting the city in shades of gray and silver. It was as though the heavens themselves were weeping for what had been done to me, but the tears of the world didn't concern me anymore. I leaned over the desk, my fingers dancing across the keyboard as I searched for what I needed. It was almost too easy. Everything was at my fingertips, each click of the mouse pulling me deeper into the web of lies and deceit my sister and husband had carefully woven. My hands moved like an extension of my thoughts, every keystroke pulling me closer to the revelation of their treachery. I will make them regret the day they ever crossed me. I had the poison, the betrayal, the lies. But what I needed now were the cracks, the chinks in their armor that I could exploit. There was no rush, no need to act recklessly. I was patient, meticulous. Every step would be calculated, every move deliberate. The night stretched on and the clock ticked relentlessly in the background. My body ached with the quiet tension of anticipation. My fingers paused above the keys as I came across an encrypted file. I smiled to myself. This was it. This was the key to everything. I could feel the adrenaline surge in my veins, a delicious warmth spreading through me as I cracked the code. The screen flickered, the document unfolding with a wealth of information that was both damning and illuminating. This wasn't just about the money they'd stolen from me. This was bigger, much bigger. I could see the connections now. The money laundering, the falsified investments, the fraudulent accounts. My sister Ethan and the woman who had taken him. Every one of them had been involved in something far darker than I could have imagined. I felt the rush of power as I absorbed the depth of their deceit. My hands trembled not with fear, but with exhilaration. I had found the cracks, and now I would tear them wide open. The following morning, I stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at the reflection of the woman who had risen from the ashes of betrayal. My skin was pale, my eyes still tinged with the exhaustion of the past few days, but beneath that weariness, there was something else. Something fierce. Something unbreakable. The woman in the mirror wasn't the same one who had collapsed on the cold floor, poisoned by her own blood. No. This woman was alive. More alive than she had ever been. I ran my fingers through my dark hair, my gaze never leaving the woman in the mirror. The pain of the past few days still lingered. But now it was my weapon. I wasn't going to let it crush me. I was going to use it. I didn't need Ethan's apology. I didn't need his regret. And I certainly didn't need my sister's false remorse. What I needed now was justice. And I would have it, whether they begged for it or not. I picked up my phone, my fingers lingering over the screen. I scrolled through the contacts. Old friends, business associates, people who could help me. I'd need them soon. The stage was set, and I was ready to pull the strings. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place, and with each move I made, I felt the power growing within me. Later that evening, the sound of the doorbell ringing broke the stillness of the apartment. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't flinch. I had been expecting this. I stood at the door for a moment, gathering my thoughts, before I opened it. Ethan stood on the other side, his face drawn and tired. The guilt was written all over him, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as if he were trying to hide from the weight of his own conscience. "Sarah," he started, his voice thick with the same fake apology he'd given me before, the same empty words. But I wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. I stepped aside, letting him in. He didn't speak as he walked past me, his footsteps heavy on the floor. I closed the door behind him, locking it with a finality that spoke volumes. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Ethan said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was softer now, almost desperate. "I know I hurt you, and You don't get to apologize," I interrupted coldly, cutting him off. "Not anymore. You don't get to take back what you've done." His face tightened, and I saw the flicker of frustration in his eyes. "Sarah, No," I said firmly, stepping toward him. "I don't need your excuses, Ethan. Not now. I've had enough of your lies." His eyes darted away, but I could see the anger flickering beneath the surface. He was about to say something, to plead, to ask for forgiveness, but I wasn't going to give him that chance. "You think I'm weak," I said, my voice low but steady. "You think you can just walk back into my life and make everything okay. But you're wrong. You've made your bed, and now you'll lie in it." Ethan opened his mouth, but I held up my hand to silence him. The power was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let him take it back. "You're going to watch me destroy everything you've built. Slowly, methodically. You won't even know it's happening until it's too late," I said, my voice soft but lethal. "And you will regret the day you ever thought you could betray me." The rain tapped softly against the window, an eerie soundtrack to the silence in my apartment. The world outside had become a blur of gray and reflection, nothing but a ghostly mirror to the storm brewing within me. My heart pounded, but the rhythm wasn't one of fear. It was anticipation. I had been poisoned by the ones I trusted most in the world, betrayed by my sister, and abandoned by the man I had loved for years. But something had changed inside me as I lay on that cold hospital floor. The poison had been meant to destroy me, but instead, it had ignited something in me. A fire. A hunger. A thirst for something far greater than vengeance. I had spent the last few days in quiet observation, mapping out every move my sister and Ethan had made. Slowly, deliberately, I had gathered the pieces of their web of lies, their carefully constructed facades. I would tear it all down, one strand at a time. The first step was the hardest, acknowledging that they were no longer the people I once knew. They were enemies now, and I was their hunter. But even knowing that didn't make the sting of betrayal any less painful. It still cut through me like a knife. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as I stood up from my chair, gazing out at the city below. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a thick mist hanging in the air. I had spent the past few days calculating my every move. I had learned everything there was to know about them, every transaction, every whispered secret, every moment of weakness they had ever shown. But they won't see me coming. 2 days later, I had made my first move. The company Ethan had invested in, the one I had once helped him grow, had taken a significant hit today. A small, subtle hit. A glitch in the system. A data breach. One that wouldn't raise any immediate red flags, but would lead to a slow erosion of their financial stability. And I had arranged it all. I sat in front of my laptop, eyes narrowing as I watched the small, steady decline on the stock ticker. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I executed the next phase. An anonymous tip to the authorities about financial discrepancies within Ethan's company. Not enough to sink them right away, but enough to make them panic. Ethan's face had flashed before me as I watched the numbers drop. His confusion, his panic. It was all part of the plan. The sweet, sweet satisfaction of watching him squirm. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wasn't just after Ethan's money, his empire, or his reputation. I was after something far deeper. The thing I had once given him so freely, trust. And the only way to take that back, to rip it from him, was to show him exactly how much power I held. The following night, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in a deep, velvety shade of purple and red. I was seated at the edge of my bed, laptop open before me, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light. The reflection in the window was almost ghostly, my own face staring back at me like a stranger. I hadn't seen Ethan in 2 days. He'd tried to call, left messages, but I had ignored them all. He wasn't getting the message yet, but he would. My phone buzzed, and I froze. I didn't recognize the number, but something inside me told me I needed to pick it up. I slid my thumb across the screen, answering the call. "Sarah?" a voice asked, hesitantly. It was Ethan. "I'm listening," I said coldly, leaning back against the headboard, staring at the reflection of my own face. "Sarah, please. I know I've hurt you and I don't know how to make it right, but I'm sorry. Please, just give me a chance to explain. We can talk. We can fix this." I felt a wave of disgust rise within me, the anger I had buried rising up like a tidal wave. Fix this? How could he possibly fix what he had broken? How could he undo the years of lies, the betrayal that had ruined everything I thought was real? "You can't fix this, Ethan," I said softly, my voice full of quiet venom. "Not anymore. You poisoned me. You killed the person I used to be. And you think an apology is enough? After everything?" There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear his breathing, shallow and desperate. "I'm done listening to your apologies," I continued, my voice steady. "It's too late for that. You think you can just come in here and fix it? You don't get to fix this. Not this time." His voice cracked, a desperation seeping through. "Please, Sarah. I still love you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but there was no sorrow, no pity left in me. "I don't need your love," I said coldly. "I'm not the woman who loved you anymore. I don't need anything from you, and I don't forgive you." I ended the call before he could respond, the finality of it ringing louder than any words ever could. I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with power, with the knowledge that I now controlled everything. The next day, I had made my move again. This time, it was my sister. I'd learned about the shady investments she'd made through her trusted lawyer. The documents, now in my possession, were damning, everything I needed to ruin her life. I was playing a dangerous game, but I was the one who held the cards now. They had no idea what was coming for them. The plan was in motion, and I wasn't going to stop until they paid the price for everything they had done to me. I spent the days that followed in a haze of focus. The poison that had once made my blood run cold had done more than nearly kill me. It had transformed me, sharpened me, like a blade honed in the darkest corners of my soul. I had no time for weakness, no time for hesitation. Every move, every action was a part of a symphony I was orchestrating, and my symphony was one of destruction. Each morning I woke early, before the sun could kiss the horizon, and sat at my desk, the glow of my computer screen illuminating the room in a soft, unforgiving light. I had become familiar with the life of shadows, the cold, the silence, the careful calculation of every move. But the quiet was never truly peaceful. It was always filled with the hum of my thoughts, the constant thrumming of my revenge. I spent hours sifting through the documents I had collected, proof of my sister's betrayal, of Ethan's greed, of the life they had built while leaving me in the dark. Every piece of information was a weapon, every transaction a wound, and soon I would make them bleed. 2 weeks later, I had become a ghost in my own life. The woman who had been poisoned, betrayed, abandoned, she was no more. Now, I was the woman who would bring them to their knees. I moved through the world with purpose, unnoticed by the people around me, the ghosts of my former self drifting like forgotten memories. It was another late night when I made my next move. Ethan had become predictable, his life revolving around his business deals and his affair with that woman. He had been calling me, texting, even showing up at my door. But I hadn't given him the satisfaction of a response. His desperation was almost pitiful, but I was beyond caring for his feelings. Tonight, however, I was going to push him further into the corner. I had a plan, one that would set his world spinning and leave him powerless. I had tracked down one of his trusted associates, a man who had worked with him on the fraudulent investments. His name was Jonathan, and he was arrogant. He thought himself untouchable, sheltered by the walls of his high-rise office and the money that flowed through his veins like blood. But no one was untouchable anymore. Midnight. The city hummed outside my window as I sat in the darkness of my apartment, my fingers dancing across the keyboard. The screen lit up with the details of Jonathan's life, Every transaction, every shady deal, every place he had been hiding. It didn't take long to find his weakness, his mistress, a woman who had unknowingly held the key to bringing him down. I crafted the perfect message, knowing it would push him to act. A single email, full of incriminating information, sent to both Jonathan and his mistress. She would think it was a mistake at first, but when she saw the details, when she saw her name tied to everything, she would panic. I hit send. The next morning, the news was all over the papers. Jonathan's name plastered across every headline, his reputation shredded in the blink of an eye. The public was ruthless, and the public loved a scandal. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at the corners of my lips as I watched the chaos unfold. Ethan's face appeared on the screen as he was interviewed, the panic in his eyes barely concealed as he tried to distance himself from the mess I had created. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Late afternoon, the phone call came as I was sitting at my desk, watching the storm I had set in motion unfold. I picked up the phone without a second thought. "Sarah," came the familiar, pained voice of Ethan. "Please, listen to me. We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming softly against the edge of the desk. His voice was low, almost desperate. He was still clinging to the hope that he could talk his way out of this, that I would forgive him. "You think I'll listen to you now?" I said coldly, my words precise. Every syllable a blade. "After?" "Sarah, please," he pleaded. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake, everything." I could hear the tremor in his voice. His walls were crumbling. "Don't you dare try to tell me it was a mistake," I said, the venom in my tone thick. "You chose this, Ethan. You chose her. You chose your lies over me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him trying to find the right words, but there was no way to undo what had been done. "You'll pay for this," I continued, my voice steady now. "You'll feel the consequences of what you did. I never meant—" He started again, but I cut him off. "I know what you meant. But intention doesn't matter when you've already destroyed everything." With that, I hung up, leaving him in his desperation, the silence in the room overwhelming. For a moment, I felt the weight of everything I had lost. I had loved him once. I had believed in him. But that was a different person. She was dead, and in her place stood someone who would never let herself be betrayed again. Later that night, I sat in the dark, alone but not lonely. My eyes remained fixed on the computer screen as I tracked the fallout from my actions. Jonathan's mistress had already spoken to the authorities, spilling every secret she had about him. The investigation into his shady dealings had already begun. And Ethan, he would feel the sting of the scandal soon enough. The power I held now felt intoxicating. I wasn't just playing their game. I was rewriting the rules. But it wasn't over. I still had one last card to play. My sister. She thought she was untouchable, sitting on her throne, watching me suffer. But she didn't know that I had been watching her too. Every misstep, every lie. She had built her empire on deception, and now I would tear it down piece by piece. The air in the apartment had changed. The silence felt heavier now, as if the walls were pressing in with the weight of my thoughts. For the past few weeks I had lived in the shadows, quietly executing my plan, moving like a shadow through their lives, pulling at the threads they had so carefully woven. But now, the time was drawing closer. The final pieces were in place, and I could feel the storm building on the horizon. The only sound in the room was the soft clicking of the keyboard as I pulled up my sister's personal files. Lila, my own flesh and blood. The woman who had been there when I needed her most, only to turn on me when I was at my weakest. She had watched my world crumble, and I had no doubt she had enjoyed every second of it. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that I had been watching her too. Every move she made, every whispered secret. And now, it was her turn. The documents on the screen were damning. They detailed her dealings, shady investments, hidden assets, and the ties she had built to Ethan's business. She thought she was untouchable, that her connections and wealth would shield her from the consequences of her actions. But I knew better. The deeper I dug, the more I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. Her betrayal had been calculated, but mine would be surgical. The next day, the sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the room. I had always loved the quiet of early mornings, before the world stirred, before the noise and chaos of life began to overwhelm the senses. But today, there was a different kind of tension in the air. I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. The woman staring back at me was no longer the weak, heartbroken woman who had once relied on the love of her family. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone new, someone stronger. The fire in my eyes was unmistakable, a reflection of the anger, the pain, and the revenge that had fueled me from the very beginning. But it was also something else, power. And it was something I was beginning to understand. I had spent so much time living in the shadows, hiding behind my grief, my hurt. But now? Now, I was stepping into the light. This was my time, and I wasn't going to let anyone get in my way. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. Sarah. My sister's voice crackled through the line. We need to talk. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't let it show. What is it, Lila? I know what you've been doing, she said, her voice low, measured. I don't know how you got the files, but you're playing a dangerous game. You think you're the one in control, but you're wrong. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. Are you threatening me now? I asked, my voice icy. No, she replied, but there was an edge to her words. I'm warning you. You think you've been so clever, haven't you? You've been pulling strings, orchestrating everything behind the scenes, but you don't know what you're getting into. You're too far gone, Sarah. You can't just walk away from this. I felt a small, cruel smile tug at my lips. I'm not trying to walk away, Lila. I'm not trying to escape. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, what do you want? Justice? I said quietly, my fingers tapping lightly against the edge of the desk. I want what's mine. I want everything you've stolen. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. She let out a sharp breath, the sound filled with frustration and fear. You won't win, Sarah. This isn't a fight you can win. I've already won, I said, my voice cold and steady. You just don't know it yet. With that, I hung up, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. She knew now that I was aware of everything, her lies, her deceit, and she was terrified. But it wasn't fear of losing her wealth that would break her. No. It was the fear of losing the one thing she had always relied on, control. That evening, the rain had started again, gentle at first, but quickly turning into a torrential downpour. The sound of it against the windows felt like the heartbeat of the city, rushing, relentless, unstoppable. Just like the path I was on, I sat at my desk, the soft glow of the computer screen casting a cool light on my face. The files I had obtained from Lila's secret dealings were open in front of me, the evidence so damning it would send her world crumbling to the ground. I could already see it. The headlines, the scandal, the way the public would turn on her. But it wasn't just her I was after. Ethan had to pay for what he had done. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was business. It was everything we had built together, everything he had stolen from me. The affair, the lies, the manipulation. And then there was my sister, Lila. She had watched me crumble and, without a second thought, taken what was mine. She thought she could get away with it, but she wouldn't. No one who had crossed me would. The night before the storm, I stood at the window, staring out at the rain-soaked city. The darkness outside felt like an extension of the chaos inside me. I could hear the faint hum of the city, but it felt distant, irrelevant. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving in the shadows, in the silence, in the quiet moments between breaths. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I wasn't going to stop until I had my revenge. until they had nothing left. The final stage of my plan was set in motion. Lila would be exposed, Ethan would crumble, and I would rise from the ashes of their destruction, stronger, more powerful than I had ever been before. The storm outside raged against the windows, a violent symphony that mirrored the turbulence inside my mind. I had crossed a point of no return, and now the weight of my actions pressed heavily on me, but it was no longer the burden of guilt. It was power, and it was intoxicating. Each day had been a carefully orchestrated performance, the strings pulled so finely that even my closest allies couldn't see the depth of my manipulation. It had taken time, patience, precision, and the right amount of silence, but I had done it. I had positioned myself in the perfect place to strike, and now the consequences were inevitable. My laptop screen flickered as I opened the file I'd been working on for the past few weeks. It was a dossier of secrets, my sister's, Ethan's, and the others who had played their parts in the dark theater of my life. With each file I opened, each transaction I uncovered, the weight of my revenge grew heavier, and I could almost hear their lives unraveling. No one gets away with betrayal. Not anymore. The betrayal was so deeply embedded in the lives of the people I once called family, but it wasn't just personal. It was business. It was power. And, above all, it was about control. They had taken it from me, and now I would take it back, every inch. Later that night, I hadn't seen Ethan in days. He had sent countless messages, each more desperate than the last. But I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say to him. There was no apology large enough to erase what he had done. The affair, the lies, the way he had played me for a fool. It was unforgivable. But tonight, he showed up uninvited. I heard the knock on the door just as I was sitting at my desk, the weight of the world heavy on my shoulders. My pulse quickened, but I didn't move immediately. Wasn't ready. I hadn't planned for this confrontation, but then again, some things couldn't be planned. Some moments demanded to be faced head-on. I stood up and walked slowly to the door, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet apartment. I hesitated for a moment, but then I opened it. There he was, Ethan, standing in front of me, his expression torn between guilt and longing. "Sarah," he started, his voice cracking. "Please, just listen to me. I've been a fool. I know that, but I need you. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make this right." I looked at him, my gaze sharp, unwavering. "You think you can fix this, Ethan? You think you can make up for what you've done with a few words?" He flinched as if my words struck him, but he pushed on, desperate. "I never meant for things to get this bad. No, I cut him off. You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose her. You chose betrayal. And now you want me to believe you've changed? That everything can go back to normal? It doesn't work like that." He took a step closer, his hands reaching out as if trying to bridge the distance between us. But I stepped back, my eyes cold. "No, stay away from me." His hands dropped to his sides, and I could see the anguish in his eyes. "Sarah, I love you. I always have. Please, just give me a chance to prove it. We can fix this." I didn't even flinch. "Love? You think you still have a right to say that word to me? After everything? After you slept with my sister? After you poisoned me and left me to die? You can't just walk back into my life and ask for forgiveness. Not anymore." There was a beat of silence. His face paled, and I could see the realization settling in. The depth of the betrayal was too far gone for any apology to heal it. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why can't you just forgive me?" "Because," I whispered, stepping closer, my voice low and lethal, "I'm not the woman you used to know. I've been reborn, Ethan, and I'm going to make you watch as everything you've built crumbles. Slowly, methodically." His expression shifted from confusion to something darker. Fear. He knew, deep down, that I wasn't bluffing. "I'm done with you," I said, turning away from him, my back now to the door. "Get out of my life. And never come back." The next day, the day after Ethan left, the quiet felt different. The weight of it no longer crushed me, instead I felt free. I had made my first real step. The man who had destroyed my world was finally out of my reach, and now I had the control I needed to finish this. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "Jonathan," I said when he answered, the smile creeping across my lips, "I need you to get something for me. I want to make sure Ethan feels every bit of his destruction. No more clean escapes for him. We're going to break him completely." Later that night, I met with Jonathan in a secluded part of the city, away from the noise and distractions of everyday life. He was everything I needed him to be, calm, collected, and ready to execute my plan. As he handed me the flash drive, my fingers brushed against his, and for the briefest moment, I saw the glint of curiosity in his eyes. "I've got everything you need. It's all there. His offshore accounts, the fraudulent investments, the hidden assets," Jonathan said, his voice low but steady. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? Once this goes out, there's no going back." I met his gaze, feeling the power of the moment settle deep inside me. "I'm not afraid of what comes next. I've spent too long hiding in the shadows. It's time to bring the light to the truth." The morning after, the media storm was almost immediate. The news about Jonathan's leaked files exploded across the internet, every headline screaming about the financial fraud, the deceit, and Ethan's involvement in money laundering. His name was tarnished, his reputation destroyed, and now the public would know what kind of man he truly was. As I watched the news reports flood in, I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. The game had only just begun, and now I had my sights set on Lila. The soft click of the keyboard echoed through the stillness of my apartment as I worked. Hours had passed, yet time felt like an endless loop. Each click and keystroke was a reminder that every move I made brought me one step closer to dismantling the lives of those who had torn mine apart. The storm I had created was only beginning to gather strength, and I was more than ready to watch it unfold. The screen before me glowed with the details I had meticulously gathered over the past weeks. Lila's secrets, her lies, the crooked investments that had filled her pockets while she thought I was blind to it all. I hadn't been blind. I had been patient. Patience was a weapon, and I was sharpening mine. But even as the excitement of her impending destruction curled around my mind like smoke, a cold dread filled my chest. It wasn't fear. No. It was something darker. Guilt, perhaps? But for what? I wasn't the one who had betrayed the person I loved most. I wasn't the one who had torn apart the only family I had left. That guilt belonged to Lila and Ethan. I had every right to be angry, to be vengeful. I shook my head, clearing the fog of doubt. No. This was justice. This was retribution. The next day, I had not expected Lila to contact me, not after everything. But she had, and what followed was a phone call that shattered the fragile silence of my days. "Sarah." Her voice crackled through the speaker. She didn't sound like herself. There was no facade, no sweetness, just a raw, vulnerable fear. "We need to talk. In person?" I paused, my fingers tightening around the phone. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't going to beg me for another chance. No, I knew this was something different. A threat? A plea? She was more dangerous now than she had ever been. "You want to meet?" I replied, my voice cold, sharp. "Fine. I'll meet you." Later that afternoon, I stood across from her in the dimly lit cafe, watching her carefully as she sat at the table, her hands folded in front of her. The air between us was thick with the weight of everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the twisted strings that had woven our fates together. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She was calculating, like me. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted by something I couldn't quite place. "Sarah," she started, her voice a little too steady. "I know what you're planning. I know what you've been doing." I didn't flinch. "So, you know everything?" She nodded, but it wasn't in defeat. It was with a quiet kind of resolution. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "This isn't a game. You think you're punishing me, but but all you're doing is making it worse for yourself." I raised an eyebrow, my lips curling into a smile that was more bitter than triumphant. "You're right. It's not a game. But that doesn't mean I won't win." She stared at me for a moment, her eyes hardening. "I know you're angry. I know what you've been through. But you don't have to go this far. Ethan, he's the one who hurt you. Not me." The words hit me like a slap. "No, Lila," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You're the one who set all of this into motion. You're the one who watched me suffer, who let me fall, and you knew exactly what was happening. You made me a target, and now you want to act like you're innocent?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see it in her eyes, fear. She was afraid, not of losing me. No, she was afraid of what I could do, what I was capable of now. "This ends with you, Lila," I said softly, leaning forward. My eyes locked onto hers, unblinking. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. Everyone will see the truth, and you will pay for what you've done." I watched her face twist with emotion, anger, regret, fear, all of it mixing together. And then, like a mask cracking, something else slipped through. A flicker of something I couldn't name. "Sarah, you don't have to do this," she whispered, the calm exterior falling away. "I've already lost. I don't have the power you think I do anymore." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "You don't get to choose when it's over, Lila." "I do." Later that evening, the storm was back. The rain came down in torrents, hitting the pavement like an endless drumbeat. I stood by the window in my apartment, watching as the streets blurred beneath the steady downpour. I had done it. I had made my move. The first real crack in Lila's empire had begun. The phone rang. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew who it was. "Sarah," Ethan's voice came through, ragged, unsure. "We need to talk. We can fix this. Please." I couldn't help the twisted satisfaction that filled me. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice colder than it had ever been. "There's nothing left to fix." "I've tried," he pleaded, desperation in his tone. "I'm sorry, I didn't." "Stop?" My voice cut through his ramblings like a blade. "You don't get to apologize anymore. I'm done with you." There was a long silence, then a sigh on the other end. "I don't know what you want me to say. I know I've ruined everything. But please, Sarah, just give me a chance to explain. You had your chance," I said, my words calm and final. "And you ruined it. I won't let you destroy me again." The line went silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the defeat in his breath. But before he could say anything else, I hung up. That night, I sat in the dim light of my apartment, a glass of wine in my hand. The silence had become my companion, the quiet punctuated only by the sound of my own thoughts. But now I didn't feel empty. I felt something more. Power. I had just begun my plan, but I could already feel the weight of it. The way the world was shifting under my feet. Slowly, but inevitably. No one betrays me and walks away unscathed. The phone buzzed again. It was Lila, but this time, her message was different. "I'll do anything to make this stop." I smiled to myself, a cold, calculated smile. She had no idea that this was just the beginning. The rain had long since stopped, but the oppressive heaviness that lingered in the air hadn't dissipated. The world outside my window was still, a city that hadn't noticed the war I'd waged from within. But I had noticed, and everything had changed. It was in the air, the quiet whispers of secrets that had been hidden too long, and in the way the darkness felt a little closer, a little more alive. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the screen before me a reflection of the twisted web I had woven. The final move was in place. Everything I had done, every lie I had uncovered, every step I had taken, was about to come to fruition. I had set the stage. I had pulled every string, and now it was time for the curtain to fall. 3 days before, Lila had come to me again, desperate, broken in a way I had never seen her before. Her pride, her facade of strength, had crumbled. The walls that had once separated us now felt like a distant memory. She had tried to apologize, tried to explain away her actions with words I didn't care about. Her tears, her trembling hands, none of it mattered anymore. It was too late. But the meeting had been necessary. I had to see her one last time, to remind her that she had lost. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she had said, her voice shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could have everything. Ethan, the money, the power. But I never realized how much I hurt you." I had stared at her, my face impassive. The woman who had poisoned me, who had destroyed the only real thing I'd ever had. She was nothing. "You should have thought about that before you crossed the line," I had replied quietly, my voice calm but sharp as a knife. "Before you took everything from me." She had begged, pleading with me to stop, but the weight of her betrayal was too much. My heart was cold to her. I was no longer the sister she had once known, and she knew it. She could see it in my eyes. This was the last time she would come to me as if I was still someone who cared. The day after, Ethan had tried to reach me again. His calls had become more frequent, his messages more frantic. He had even gone as far as to show up at my apartment uninvited. I had ignored him, silencing his voice without a second thought. This was no longer about saving him. This wasn't about love. I had shed that skin long ago. But then, a single message had caught my attention. "I can fix everything. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance to prove that I can make it right. I'm sorry. I am so sorry." I had laughed. He thought I was still the same woman he had wronged, the one who had begged for his love. He had no idea who I was now. I read the message one more time, then deleted it. It was nothing more than noise. Ethan was nothing more than a memory. He no longer held any sway over me. I had already made my decision. The final day. The morning had come, crisp and still. The world outside felt like it had been suspended in time. The streets still slick with the remnants of the rain. The sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. It was as if the world knew that the final act was unfolding, and the play was almost over. I stood in front of the mirror once again, my reflection staring back at me with cold eyes. I no longer recognized the woman I had been. She was dead, poisoned by lies and betrayal, and in her place was someone who would never let anyone destroy her again. I could feel the weight of everything I had done, the toll it had taken on my soul. Revenge had a way of consuming everything, your thoughts, your actions, your desires. But I had done what I needed to do. The world would see the truth. I had exposed their lies, their deceit, their corruption, and in the end, they would pay for every ounce of pain they had caused me. Later that day, I stood in front of my sister, the final confrontation inevitable. The power I held over her now was palpable, hanging between us like a dark cloud. She had come to me one last time, this time with no more pride, no more excuses. Just desperation. "I can't fix this, can I?" she whispered, her voice broken. I didn't answer her immediately. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She had taken everything from me, destroyed what I had worked so hard to build. But it wasn't just about the money, the status, the betrayal. It was about something deeper, something visceral. "You never had a chance," I said quietly, my voice a soft whisper, but it cut through her like a blade. "You never understood the cost of your actions. You never thought about what would happen if you crossed me." Her eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and regret. But it was too little, too late. I took a step closer to her, my voice steady. "I gave you my trust, and you threw it away. You poisoned me, you used me, and now you'll pay for it." "I'm sorry," she whispered again. But this time, it was hollow. The apology was nothing but an empty echo, a desperate attempt to win back something that had already been lost. I didn't speak again. There was nothing more to say. With one last look at her, I turned my back on her and walked away. The final hours. The world seemed quieter now. The final moves had been made. I watched the news as my sister's empire began to crumble. The fraudulent dealings, the hidden accounts, the lies, it all came spilling out like a dam bursting open. Jonathan's involvement had been exposed. Ethan's company was in shambles. The money laundering, the falsified investments, all of it was there for the world to see. I had won. I felt a strange, hollow satisfaction as I watched the chaos unfold. For a moment, I thought I might feel relief. But there was nothing. There was only emptiness. Revenge had cost me more than I could have ever anticipated. I stood at the window, the finality of it all sinking in. The rain had returned, but this time I didn't mind. It was cleansing. It was over. The world felt different now. Lighter in a way, but heavier in another. The weight of what I had done still hung around me like a thick fog, but it was no longer the suffocating burden it once was. I had stepped into the shadows of my own making, and now, as the storm that had raged inside me quieted, I could see the broken pieces of my life scattered around me. Lila was gone. Ethan was gone. The empire they had built together had crumbled to dust, and with it, the last remnants of the life I had once known. The lies, the betrayal, the poison that had nearly killed me. It was all behind me now, buried in the wreckage of their downfall. But as the pieces of their world fell apart, something inside me remained unchanged. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that dinner party, when I sipped from the poisoned glass. The woman I had been, broken, innocent, was dead, poisoned not just by the liquid in my veins, but by the people I had trusted most in the world. The woman who stood in the mirror now was someone different, someone stronger, someone who had learned to wield pain like a weapon. But was that enough? Days later, the apartment felt empty in a way it hadn't before. The silence stretched out like an endless expanse of nothingness. I had been alone for days, and while the chaos had finally settled, there was an eerie calm now that made my bones ache with the weight of everything that had transpired. I hadn't expected to feel this way. When I had first started on this path, I had been so sure, so certain that revenge would bring me peace. But now, standing in the quiet of my apartment, I wasn't so sure anymore. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. The streets were bustling with people, the world going on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. I wasn't the woman I had been before. I wasn't even the woman I had become during this ordeal. I was something else entirely. The phone rang again, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't need to check the caller ID to know who it was. Ethan. He had been relentless, his messages growing more frantic as the weeks went by. But now, his calls had become more subdued, quieter. I didn't answer the phone. This wasn't his time anymore. But then, a voice that wasn't Ethan's came through. Sarah? It was Jonathan. I hadn't spoken to him since his betrayal had been exposed. But somehow, I wasn't surprised that he was calling now. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. I leaned against the wall, staring out at the gray cityscape. A part of me had expected this. Jonathan had been just as much a part of this mess as Ethan and Lila. His greed had played a role in everything. His manipulations, his quiet alliance with the people who had nearly destroyed me. I don't think I have anything to say to you, Jonathan, I replied, my voice cold and measured. I know what you think of me, he said softly, but I'm not asking for forgiveness. I need to say I'm sorry for what I did. I almost laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. Sorry. You've lost everything, Jonathan. What could your apology possibly mean? There was a long pause. His voice came through, quieter now. I was part of something much bigger than I realized. I thought I could play the game, get rich, and walk away without consequence. But I see now that I was just as much a pawn as the rest of us, and it cost me everything. And what's left for you now? I asked. Is there a redemption waiting for you in the ruins of your life? I don't know, he replied, his voice uncertain, but I can tell you this, I'll never make the same mistake again. I've lost too much to be that foolish again. I didn't respond. My gaze remained fixed on the city below. Jonathan had been a player in this twisted game, but like Ethan, like Lila, his power was gone. And there was no coming back from that. A week later, the news was everywhere. The scandal involving Ethan, Lila, and Jonathan had exploded onto every headline. The arrests, the investigations, the way the world had turned against them. It was a sweet, bitter victory. I watched the coverage from the comfort of my apartment, a glass of wine in my hand, the cold, smooth surface of the glass a familiar comfort. There was no satisfaction in this. There was no feeling of triumph as I watched the world crumble beneath their feet, only a quiet emptiness. And yet, it was enough. The final confrontation. I knew this day was coming. The final act of the play I had started. It had all led to this. Lila had reached out again. This time she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to explain herself. She simply asked to meet one last time. I had nothing left to say to her. But something about this final meeting felt necessary. Like the last piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. We met in the same cafe, the one where everything had started. The rain was falling again, just as it had that night, and the world outside seemed to be holding its breath. Lila sat across from me, her face pale, the usual arrogance gone. She had nothing left to hide. There were no more lies, no more pretending. "I never thought you'd make it this far," she said quietly, her voice a mix of defeat and something else I couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps. "I thought you'd crumble. I thought you'd forgive me." I shook my head slowly. "You were wrong." She didn't argue. Instead, she let out a long sigh, her shoulders slumping. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything anymore. But I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stared at her for a long moment. I had hated her, despised her for everything she had done. But now, in this moment, all I felt was nothing. "There's no going back now," I said softly. "And there's no way to fix what's broken. But this was your choice, not mine." Lila nodded, the weight of it all sinking in. The silence between us stretched on. Then, finally, she stood up, her shoulders hunched in defeat. She walked away, not looking back. Later, the world continued to turn, the city bustling below me, indifferent to the war that had just ended. I stood by the window, looking out over the horizon as the sky slowly turned dark. The revenge was complete. The pieces had all fallen into place, each part of the plan executed with precision. But as I looked out over the city, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that had settled within me. I had won, yes, but at what cost? I had destroyed the people I once loved, and in doing so I had lost something too, something I couldn't get back. Was it worth it? I didn't know, and maybe I never would. But I was free. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was free.